Hello friends, Alex Jones here, coming to you from our new studios here in Austin, Texas, and I'm excited here in our inaugural first show to have Stewart Rhodes, the founder of Oath Keepers. Stewart's a really amazing guy. He's, of course, a former Army paratrooper, and he's a graduate of Yale Law School, a constitutional lawyer. He also worked for several years in Congressman Ron Paul's office. But I think the most important thing he's done is found Oath Keepers all across the United States. They've educated hundreds and hundreds of thousands of military and millions of veterans, both currently serving and former military who've now gotten out of the military. And it's been said by many historians that tyranny is going to come to your door in a uniform. And if we look at what happened in Eastern Europe or what happened in Eastern Germany with the fall of the Berlin Wall, and before that with some of the resistance movements, time and time again, it was either the military and the police that oppressed the people or that stood down and allowed liberty to basically win the day. And anybody who studied history or even has any basic common sense knows that we're losing our basic liberties in this country, and that an organized, despotic system of autocratic control is being established. And so for the next 25 minutes or so, we're going to be talking to Stewart Rhodes, the founder of Oath Keepers. And while he was here in Austin, part of a speaking tour he's involved in, he brought a few of his associates, Brandon Smith, who's working on alternative grassroots currency systems or barter, and also Michael Boldin, 10th Amendment Center, really defining what is 10th Amendment nullification, not the demonization we've seen from George Soros and the private Federal Reserve that's hijacked our federal government, but from people that have actually really studied what the Founding Fathers said and what the Constitution and Bill of Rights states. And so without further ado, Stewart Rhodes, great to have you here with us.
Pleasure, Alex. Thanks for having me on.
Break it down. I mean, there's so much we can talk about. Why do we need Oath Keepers? What are the 10 orders you will not follow? Why did you found this organization?
Well, the critical thing is, as you said a minute ago, tyranny can either come in the uniform or it can die by the uniform. If the military stands down, just simply says no, and withdraws their support, as was done in 1989 in East Germany, the tyrant, no matter how bloodthirsty they are, cannot do it without them. In that situation, there was an order to suppress peaceful protests. The commander of the military refused to do so and ordered his men to stand down, and 2 days later the wall fell. And in fact, we have an interview, a video interview on our website with a former East German lieutenant colonel who's now a Texas Oath Keeper, who was there when the wall fell. And he describes very vividly how they just simply stayed on base, and that was it. The Stasi secret police, after that, were hiding, tearing off their uniform badges, trying to pretend like they were just average soldiers, hiding among the people, and they were powerless. Before that, they were feared. They were the finger. You know, no one could do anything to them or touch them. And now, without the support of the military, they were nothing. And we saw the same thing just happen in Tunisia. You had the dictator there order the military to fire on the people. When the military refused and stood down, the dictator in Tunisia was forced to flee the country. They cannot do it without them. So that's the first part of our mission, is to reach the current serving, remind them of their oath. In this country, we have something they didn't even have in East Germany. We have an oath to the Constitution, and we have a very clear set of rules of shall nots in our Bill of Rights that they're supposed to be protecting and refusing to violate. That's why we have our Declaration of Orders we will not obey, is really just a restatement of the Bill of Rights of things that they should have learned in school long ago. But we were never taught these things in school. They intentionally dumb us down in public schools and don't teach us our own heritage and our own Constitution. So we're going to fix that. We're going to go teach the troops what they already should know. They already have the courage and honor. If they have the knowledge, then they'll do the right thing.
Now, in the couple years that you guys have been active, you've had a huge effect, and I've seen it on the street. I've witnessed it with my own syndicated radio show, but also when I've traveled around the country. But the big indicator of the fact that you've hit a nerve, and really the weak spot on the belly of the dragon, is that the federal government, the Southern Poverty Law Center, the ADL, the George Soros type groups, Rachel Maddow, they have gone absolutely ballistic with you guys. All you're saying is police, military, read the Bill of Rights, read the Constitution, study, what this country was founded on. I know that even until just the last decade, there were large courses taught when my grandfathers were in the military all about the president isn't a dictator, Congress declares war, you are not to follow an order that violates law. I mean, because coming out of World War II, we just seen Nuremberg, where thousands of these Nazis got up and were shaking in fear, saying, we were ordered to arrest people. We were ordered to take property. We were ordered to take people away, to work them to death and to shoot them in the back of the head. And that common law understanding came to the fore again, that just following orders doesn't cut it. I mean, if I tell one of my employees, go down to the corner liquor store with this .357 Magnum and rob them, and then the cops catch them, they don't say, well, my boss told me to come, rob this liquor store. It just doesn't work. And there are a lot of people that join the military for the right reasons. That's the vast majority, but clearly some people join it because they have these visions of being a tough guy involved in combat. And it seems like the system tries to go in and pick out some of those more sociopathic types. The same thing happens in law enforcement. But looking at the numbers, the vast majority of Ron Paul's presidential donations from the military, the vast majority were to him. And I've talked to the military, I've talked to police. By and large, they're some of the best people in America. And I think that you've basically found the Achilles heel of the system, Stuart. So let's talk more about what's happening in America that illustrates, from your constitutional law perspective and as a veteran, that illustrates historically that tyranny isn't down the street or over the hill, it's knocking on our door. And now is the time for the American people to reach out to the police and military, and now is the time for the police and the military to make a decision historically, to look at the facts and to decide which side of history they're going to be on.
That's right. Well, relentlessly since World War II especially, but even long before that, has been the creation of an infrastructure of totalitarianism in the United States. And people say, well, that's ridiculous. Well, look at the claim power of the president to intern any American citizen as an unlawful enemy combatant. No indictment, no grand jury indictment, no jury trial, just whisked away to a brig and then tried before a kangaroo court of officers selected by the president. FDR claimed this long before him. Lincoln claimed this power. Supreme Court ruled was unconstitutional, but FDR tried to do it again, and that Supreme Court, the New Deal Supreme Court, rubber stamped his claimed authority to bring the international laws of war home to the United States and apply the international laws of war, which you would use on a foreign enemy, and apply it to the American people. That's the claim. And Bush grabbed the same claim power and expanded it even more in the nebulous war against terrorism. If he says you are an enemy, then he could detain you and try you by military tribunal. That was his claim. The Supreme Court, unfortunately, rubber stamped that in the Hamdi decision. And then you had Obama come in, and he went even a step further. You're not even going to get detained or even tried by military tribunal. He'll just have you assassinated, have you executed by predator drone.
Including U.S. citizens.
Oh yeah, any U.S. citizen he thinks is an unlawful combatant. He has a secret list of Americans he wants to kill, and his claim is that the Supreme Court can't even see his list, that no one's allowed to see his list. It's on his authority alone. We must trust him to be picking out the right targets. But the fundamental problem is they're trying to say that they can treat an American the same as a foreign enemy, as though we were like occupied Japan or occupied Germany, or as though you were an Iraqi or an Afghani on the battlefields of Afghanistan or Iraq. They're saying they can use the same power there, here at home in the United States.
Wow, well, we'll talk about this more later because I want you to continue. But earlier you were on my syndicated radio broadcast and we were going over the Associated Press article with Bernard von Nuthaus, 13 years issuing his own competing private currency, totally legal. You actually have the U.S. code right there in front of you. They convicted him with a kangaroo federal jury of counterfeiting. And then the prosecutor said, this is a great victory. We're going to infiltrate these groups as if people are hiding, and we're going to stop these domestic terrorists who are competing with the Federal Reserve. But it's the Federal Reserve itself that is the counterfeiter. They've been in control of our currency since 1913. The dollar says Federal Reserve note. It doesn't say U.S. note. It's not backed by gold or silver. But I want to cover that more later. The reason I brought that up, Stuart, is that since they passed the Patriot Act more than 9 years ago, since its passage, I constantly see articles out of Alabama, Texas, California, New York with similar headlines. Police and prosecutors use Patriot Act in thousands of non-terror related cases, marijuana, domestic disputes. They are overturning our entire system of checks and balances. and admittedly using all of this new anti-terror law against the general public. And if you read Section 802 of the Patriot Act, it states that it's for the general public. I mean, this is really tyranny, and that's what Oath Keepers is there for. When you talk to a group of police officers and military men and women, what do you say to them?
What I tell them is that, look, the powers that were being expanded, the powers of the government that were expanded in the name of fighting against Islamist terrorism are now being swung inward on us. And I use the MIAC report that you helped expose. I use the DHS reports on returning veterans. And they get it. They understand. They can see that the current crop in the White House and in charge of the government, they can see that they don't like them. That most police officers are veterans. So they do get it. Right now we have a window of opportunity to deprogram them after the indoctrination of the Bush years to just go along with a lot of this stuff. So they see that Southern Poverty Law Center's characterization of veterans and even currently serving military within Oath Keepers, they can see it's nonsense. And so they are starting to wake up and pay attention to what's really going on, is that if you dare to talk about or act like the Founding Fathers wanted us to behave as a free people, you will be demonized, you will be attacked, you'll be labeled an enemy of the state and a terrorist. And the cops and the military understand what's going on.
Well, going back to the MIAC report and subsequent reports that have been leaked, there's a reason state police and federal marshals and others have sent me these type of documents. Is because they understand how bizarre and Orwellian it is to say, if you got a Ron Paul bumper sticker or an American flag, or get us out of the UN, or if you want to end the private Federal Reserve. I mean, it's so indicative of how illegitimate the power structure is and the private interests that have taken control of Washington are, that they see the police and military that are awake as their enemy. Because they are tyrants, they are criminals, they are usurpers. And so in truth, good, red-blooded American police and military are the enemy of the New World Order. So they're really tipping their hand there. It's just that police and military who are not awake to this, who haven't been informed, who haven't been able to see my information or your information, they're really in the dark. But that threat is still there, even if they're ignorant. So that's why I want to ask every person out there watching this at prisonplanet.tv or on YouTube and across the web, send this to everybody you know. Send this video and send this link to your police chief, to your sheriff. Burn it off on disk. Hand deliver it to them. Because if we can reach out to our military and police and show them the historical facts of what we're covering and show them that history is repeating itself, it's a major checkmate to the globalists. Go over some of the 10 orders that you guys will not follow.
Well, number one is we will not obey orders to disarm the American people. And this is something we saw happen in Katrina. I mean, I was on Bill O'Reilly's show. He's like, oh, when's this ever going to happen? I said, well, it just happened. And then he said, well, it's a state of emergency, so of course you have to do that. And I said, well, a state of emergency doesn't cancel the Second Amendment. But the problem is the mindset out there of people like Bill O'Reilly and many other mainstream Republicans is that, well, when there's really a bad emergency, then we set aside the Constitution. And that's upside down. The whole point of the Bill of Rights was to be there when we're afraid, when we're scared, when we're angry, and to stop us from doing, it's like the werewolf, right? Lon Chaney, chain me down. When I go crazy under the full moon, I'm going to do, wrong things. That's what the Bill of Rights is supposed to be, is to chain ourselves down when we're afraid. You need the First Amendment and Second Amendment and the Third and Fourth and Fifth, especially during wartime and during emergency. That's what they're for. And so all we're saying is we will not violate our Bill of Rights. We won't obey orders to conduct warrantless searches on the American people, as the NSA has been doing now for years. That was one of the reasons why our forefathers rebelled against the Crown, was the writs of assistance, warrantless searches. We will not obey orders to detain American citizens as unlawful enemy combatants or subject them to military tribunal. Article 3 of the Treason Clause mandates a civilian trial and 2 witnesses to the overt act when you're accused of making war against your own country. That's the constitutional remedy, not spiriting you away to Gitmo or just a military brig in South Carolina where you don't get a lawyer. So we won't do these things. We will not obey orders to impose martial law or a state of emergency on a state. Article 4, Section 4 makes very clear that the U.S. government can't come into a state without being invited by the state legislature or the governor.
And just to briefly interrupt, I want you to go back to that. I remember going to urban warfare drills 12, 14 years ago, different events, and seeing the military train with role players to fight the American people.